Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, y'all are having a wonderful day today. So, I thought that I would review this little video, or not review this video, excuse me, but I thought I would give you guys my fight prediction. There's a lot of good fights on this weekend, both UFC or MMA and boxing, and I am very excited if you cannot tell for this weekend. But when it comes down to the unfortunate thing about it is that two of them are on pay-per-view, so I have to decide between one of the two to get, and to me it wasn't really that hard of a choice. I went with UFC 253 because there's some very big fights on there, and on top of that, I believe that it's just more worth the price. That's probably going to be about $60. So if you kind of are in the same dilemma that I am in and, deciding which pay-per-view to get, I personally would go with UFC 253, but that is your choice. Anyway, when it comes down to the overall, bottom line is this. We're going to do the prediction for Jermall Charlo versus Sergey Derevyanchenko today. I might give you guys my slight prediction on Jermall Charlo versus Rosario, but I haven't really done a great amount of research on Rosario, so when it comes down to it, I don't know if that would really be responsible of me to give you guys my prediction on that fight, because I don't really know an extreme amount about Rosario. I know that he beat Julian Williams last time in that fight, but I still don't know a great amount about him, so I'm probably just going to give you a slight prediction on that right now, which is that I believe Jermall Charlo will probably win by unanimous decision. I wouldn't be surprised if Rosario won. I wouldn't be surprised if it was a split decision. But from what I've seen from Rosario, although he is a very decent boxer, I just don't know what he really brings to the table to beat Jermall Charlo from what I've seen. He seems like a very decent counterpuncher. He seems to put his gloves up decent, or, put his hands up decently, but it doesn't look like he necessarily has no mobility. It doesn't look like he has the full arsenal of skills to beat Charlo. I'm not sure how well he's going to handle that power, although it does look like Rosario has power of his own. So we'll see what happens, but I'm going to go with Jermall Charlo by unanimous decision in that fight, at least 8 rounds to 4, if not 9 rounds to 3. That's what I'm going to expect from that fight. And I expect Charlo to gain the other belt/belts because I believe that is a unification fight. Anyway, so that's my expectations for that fight. Let's get into the main fight that we're going to be talking about today. Jermall Charlo versus Sergey Derevyanchenko. So this is a very interesting fight. And for those of you guys that don't know why, this is really going to be Jermall Charlo's biggest test in a very, very, very long time. The biggest test in Jermall Charlo's career probably was against Julian J. Rock Williams, and that was a very interesting fight. I thought that both of them were capturing rounds in that fight, but of course, Julian Williams ended up losing that fight because I believe he ended up getting TKO'd within, if it wasn't 5 rounds and it was 6 rounds, I believe it was 6, but I could be wrong about that. That was Charlo's biggest test to date. This debatably is even going to be a bigger test than that. Debatably. I'm not necessarily sure because Julian Williams is a very good boxer. He can box. The only thing about J-Rock that always concerned me is that he is a bit chinny. So, and I discovered that in the Charlo fight because even though Charlo does have great power, I'm not really sure if he has the type of power to where he should really hurt you as much as he did with that damn uppercut. Now, that might sound, ignorant to say, but, I've seen Charlo hit some guys, and it's not that he does not have very good power. He does. But let's say he hits Sergey Derevyanchenko with that same shot. Do I see him knocking out Sergey Derevyanchenko the way that he did, J-Rock Williams? No, I personally don't. And J-Rock ended up getting knocked out again in the Rosario fight, so there's that. Anyway, bottom line is this. Sergey Derevyanchenko not that long ago against Gennady Golovkin, who was a top-tier middleweight. I'm not necessarily sure if he is, the second guy anymore or the second best guy in the division anymore because right now it'd probably be Canelo. But when it comes down to it, Golovkin still is a very tough guy. And Sergey Derevyanchenko gave him a very big run for his money when they fought. I don't remember how long ago it was, but they fought not too long ago. And when they did fight, a lot of people actually believe that Sergey Derevyanchenko won that fight. He had relentless pressure on Golovkin. He obviously hurt him with his power. He's the only man that I've ever seen actually probably hurt Golovkin to the point to where Golovkin bent over at one point in time in the fight because he was hurt. He was dazed. So when it comes down to the overall, this is going to be a very interesting fight because Charlo has not really faced any top contenders in the middleweight division ever since he's been there. And a lot of people might say that me saying that is a stretch. Not really. When it comes down to it, Charlo has not really faced any top contenders in the middleweight division. This is really going to be the first top contender that he's really faced there. And I'm not going to say that, because a lot of people on this fight, they're like, well, if he loses this fight, he's a complete hype job and all sort of stuff. I'm not going to go that far. But what I will say is this: Jermall Charlo needs to win this fight. And I do think that he needs to win. If he wants to be considered anywhere near the same class of a Canelo Alvarez or a Gennady Golovkin, I do think personally that he is going to have to win this fight somewhat convincingly. So we'll see what happens when it comes to that. But how do I think this fight's going to go down? I believe that Jermall Charlo will win this fight. I'm going with Jermall Charlo by either unanimous or split decision. I don't think it'll be a knockout. I think Sergey Derevyanchenko is tough enough. I think if he can handle even a little bit of an older and slightly more wore down Golovkin's power for 12 rounds, I believe he can probably handle Jermall Charlo's power for about 12 rounds. Now, maybe I'm wrong. Jermall Charlo is younger than Golovkin. He could be fresher. Maybe overall he sharpened up his skills. The thing is with the Charlo brothers for me is that although they are very good fighters, I've never really been overly impressed with their skill set. And a lot of people overall may not like me saying that. But when I take a look at the Charlo brothers, although they are decently impressive and they are good fighters, when it comes down to it, the things that I see them having problems with, Jermall Charlo could have a lot of problems with Sergey Derevyanchenko in this fight. Jermall Charlo has the issues of, first of all, not throwing enough. Both Jermall and Jermall have a problem with that. They think they're a lot more accurate than they actually are when it comes down to it. So they rely on their counterpunching. They rely on that stiff jab a lot, which is not a bad strategy. But sometimes when it comes down to it, sometimes I believe that they need to throw a little bit more. They need to throw more combos. They remind me a little bit of Danny Garcia. Danny Garcia is a very accurate counterpuncher. And personally, I think Danny is a more skilled fighter than both Charlo brothers. And a lot of people might disagree with me on that one. But it is what it is. Anyway, they remind me a little bit of Danny Garcia, where Danny Garcia, he loves to counter. He loves to throw 1-2s. And he'll throw some combinations here and there. But Danny Garcia is not necessarily a combination guy. He's mainly a 1-1-2 punch type of guy. That's why I predicted Sean Porter to beat him, and that's why I also predicted Keith Thurman to beat him when it comes down to it, because both of those guys throw punches, and they throw punches in bunches. Sergey Derevyanchenko is a man who throws punches in bunches. And if you're a counterpuncher, if you're a man overall that's facing a combo puncher, you better be an extremely accurate counterpuncher and a very effective counterpuncher in order to establish distance well if you're facing a fighter like this. Golovkin had a lot of trouble with Sergey Derevyanchenko, and Golovkin is a very similar fighter, believe it or not, because he loves to establish his jab out there. He has a pretty damn great jab, and on top of that, Golovkin, he loves to throw 1-1-2s. It's not saying that he doesn't throw combinations, but Golovkin's not really that type of guy. To beat Sergey Derevyanchenko, you're going to have to be very effective. You're going to have to be very, effective and keep distance very well, especially in there, in the later rounds, because he loves to come out, especially in the latter rounds. Sergey Derevyanchenko does have power. I want to see how well Jermall Charlo takes that. And on top of that, we're just going to see how sharp Charlo really looks in this fight. We're going to see, how well is his counterpunching ability. Will he be able to establish distance very well in this fight? Overall, how will he look? And also on top of that, how will his cardio look? I've never seen a problem with either of the Charlo brothers' gas tanks before. But the reason why I say that in this fight is because I don't know if this is going to be a fight like Charlo has ever had in his career. This might be the biggest test in his career. He might be pushed the most amount here than he has ever been in any fight in his career. Because Sergey Derevyanchenko, once he gets on, and one reason why I do predict Sergey Derevyanchenko to lose this fight is because he is a little bit of a slow starter, and that will instill confidence within Jermall Charlo, I believe, within the first few rounds, or at least the first 4 rounds in this fight. But once that, say, 5th round hits on, He's very aggressive. He's very aggressive. He comes forward. He is a little bit linear, so sometimes he can be hit, but he does have a defensive shell to where it can make him a little bit more difficult to hit than some other linear European fighters. But when it comes down to it, Jermall Charlo does need to watch out in this fight. This man has a decent amount of power. He continues coming like a trailblazer, and when it comes down to it, it's going to be a very tough fight for him, man. I think it's going to be a very tough fight. I predict this fight at least to be 8 rounds to 4. I personally believe that Jermall Charlo will get the win here. We'll also see how well his power translates at middleweight against one of the top contenders. I believe that it's still there, but we'll see if he maybe has the same power as a Danny Jacobs or some of the other ones, maybe even a Gennady Golovkin at this point in his career. Jermall Charlo has a lot of power, but his power, I think, also has looked so great because he's been against these guys that really haven't done, a great amount in the boxing ring. Now, some might disagree, or at least are not top contenders, is what I'll say. That's what I'll say. That's the more appropriate thing to say. So it is what it is. But when it comes down to it, that's really what I have to say on the matter. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens. Unfortunately, I won't be able to get the pay-per-view when it happens, but I should be able to see the fights hopefully afterwards. Maybe I might even get the pay-per-view afterwards. I'm not sure. But when it comes down to it, that's all I can really say on this fight. I predict Jermall Charlo to win by decision. I'm going to say by split decision. We'll say that if Charlo can pull out of this fight looking very impressive and winning even a clear 8 rounds to 4, I'll say 9 rounds to 3, because 9 rounds to 3 would be impressive. 8 rounds to 4 to me would be a little bit more expected. If you can win 9 rounds to 3 in this fight, I would be very impressed with Charlo, and I would say that I would love to see a Canelo versus Charlo fight, or even a Golovkin versus Charlo fight. I'd love to see those fights anyway, but when it comes down to it overall, I think it would even be more intriguing. Or hell, maybe even a Demetrius Andre versus Jermall Charlo fight. That would also be very intriguing. Also, there's some other ones there. Billy Joe Saunders might be very interesting, although he kind of switches from 168 to 160 as of late, I believe. David Lemieux might even be interesting. That could be a very, interesting fight. And maybe a couple of others that I'm not mentioning right now. But that's really about it for that. Thank you guys so much for watching. Tell me what your guys' predictions are. Charlo better take this fight seriously, because this might be the biggest challenge of his career. And we'll see what happens, guys. Anyway, that's really about it. Thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you all later.